Hey everybody, welcome back to Hacking the Headlines. In today's video, I wanted to share this interview that I came across from Larry McDonald, who was a congressman back in the 70s and early 80s, but he also tried to be a whistleblower who was speaking out against the establishment of the New World Order, or the One World Government. And much of what he said that would happen has indeed taken place in recent years, such as a push for liberalism and socialism, also that they can bring about the one world government through things like foreign relations and the United Nations. So here he's sitting down with Pat Buchanan and Tom Braden, who both talk down to him and try to make him look like a crazy conspiracy theorist. And sadly, only 3 months after this interview, Larry McDonald died after the plane he was traveling in was shot down over Russia. And this is why most people have never even heard of him, because he was taken out before he got the chance to spread the word. So I think it's important to remember his legacy and also show people how long this plan for a new world order has been going on, and that there's nothing new under the sun. You know, they've been using the same old tricks since the beginning of time, and it's only now, after decades of brainwashing and programming the masses, they're closer to success than ever before. So anyway, here's the interview so you can see it for yourself. And I do apologize for the poor audio quality. It's an old interview from 1983, and this is the best clip I could find. So here it is.
Mr. McDonald, I'm not a conspirator. I think even Buchanan would vouch for that.
Well, you are
Robert
Foreign
Wells.
Relations.
Robert Wells. No, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Is that a conspiracy?
Well, you've certainly. Well,
let me just tell you what Newsweek says this. The John Birch Society considers communism only one arm of a master conspiracy in which socialist American insiders are plotting to establish world government. Now, it also says, and here's Director John McManus, that's your public relations director, saying that former Secretary of State Alexander Haig and CIA Director William Casey are two of these master conspirators who are plotting to establish world government. Now, what do you say? That kind of silly, asinine statement is what makes people laugh at the John Birch Society.
Well, Tom, I'm sure being a long-standing member of the Rockefeller apparatus and as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations of long-standing, you're fully aware that there is an elitist core in this country that has seen value in subsidizing communism, of protecting communism.
It has?
Sure.
You're accusing me of subsidizing communism?
No, I'm saying
because I happen to belong to
there is an elite core
study group?
No, wait a minute. There is an elite core in this country that has dominated American society.
Well, I'm not one of them.
Let me
Trilateral Commission.
The Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations.
State Department, I suppose?
Well, let's face it, they've dominated the State Department for 40 years, and pretty much openly
All right,
so.
but what are they trying to do,
Well, their objective is to try to bring about a gradual transition in our society, a dissolving of sovereignty, and a moving steadily to the left on the political spectrum.
Well, who are they?
Belief, the elitist groups that I mentioned, particularly key individuals and policymakers in the Council on Foreign Relations.
Is the International Monetary Fund part of this?
Well, I would say the International Monetary Fund has certainly been set up for the purpose of facilitating that transfer of sovereignty and transfer of wealth on the road.
All right, we
to
elected
something.
Mr. Conservative.
Let me just finish the point, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of unanswered questions. That you are looking at a group that has worked to bring about the dissolution of national sovereignties on the road to world government. And certainly you're familiar with local professor Carroll Quigley, who has been part of your club, in which he admitted all this. And he said in his book, Tragedy and Hope, the only thing I disagree is that we've worked to keep it a secret. And you see Arthur Schlesinger Jr. writing way back in 1947, says, yes, this is the hidden policy of America. But we can't tell the American public because they're too unsophisticated to see the value.
What is the instrumentality of world government? What is the
Of
instrumentality?
all the things to say about Arthur Schlesinger, that's the silliest statement I ever heard. He never made anything like that.
Well, let me suggest that you read the May-June issue of the Partisan Review of 1947, Tom, and you can read it for yourself. It's called
Arthur Schlesinger said there was a conspiracy, to promote communism?
No, he didn't use the word conspiracy. He said the objective
what
is to
kind of
bring about...
nonsense is this?
Well, let me finish. I'll tell you. He said that the objective, the secret policy, which we can't tell the American public because they're not sophisticated enough to see the value, is that through a steady result of erosion of new deals, we bring the American society steadily to the left, and through a sound concept of benign containment, we merge into the vital center of the socialist left. Those are his words, not mine.
You think John Kennedy was a member of that
No,
conspiracy?
let me ask you this. The World Federalist Movement in the post-war era contained a lot of people who eventually broke with it, and a lot of people thought the UN in the post-war era looked toward world government. Sure. Indeed they did, up until 48, 49. But a lot of them said, look, we were utopian, that's over and done with. We can't move. And a lot of them came in Kennedy's government. Schlesinger was in there when they were fighting in Vietnam, launched the effort in Vietnam. Schlesinger was behind the Bay of Pigs. In other words, look, isn't there some move that occurred in the post-war era that now has been dissipated because nobody believes in the utopian ideal of world government anymore?
Well, I think there are those that realize that moving straight from a prototype of the United Nations into world government perhaps is tactically impossible. But phasing out increasingly national sovereignty into regional government and phasing out sovereignties into international treaties in multiple areas could be a route.
The whole movement toward, quote, interdependence.
Yeah.
NATO is part of the conspiracy?
Well, there are certainly elements in NATO. There are people in NATO who are very strongly dedicated to the defense of the West. But at the same time, you find in NATO a steady dissolution. You find a growing weakness as a NATO policy dominated by State Department policies that has not worked.
Well, it's a regional grouping, and I think, therefore, it may be suspect by the John Birch Society.
We're talking with Congressman Larry McDonald, who has recently been elevated, I guess, to chairmanship of the John Birch Society, succeeding Robert Welsh. We'll be back in a minute.
Welcome back to Crossfire. Our guest is the new chairman, recently named chairman of the John Birch Society, Congressman Larry McDonald, a Democrat from Georgia. Mr. McDonald, your predecessor believed that the PTA was too left-wing and that and the John Birch Society at one time tried to infiltrate it, or so he said. He used the word infiltrate. You still, is that part of your program now?
Well, I think when the PTA comes out in its program for the test ban treaty, and when the PTA comes out for gun control, and comes out for obviously national legislative programs that have been linked with liberaldom, having nothing to do with education of our children, I think many people are wondering what in the world is the PTA doing, and that includes members of the John Birch Society.
Well, I wonder about you. I wonder about you. I looked you up. You're the biggest joiner that I've ever seen in the world. You belong, as I counted them, to 67 organizations, among which are the National Rifle Association, the American Pistol and Revolver Association, the Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, the Second Amendment Foundation, and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms.
Well, Tom, I think there's a real drive in this country to try to destroy the realization of our citizens that they have a fundamental constitutional right to keep and bear arms as the Constitution allows. And unfortunately, there are those in our society, including elements of the PTA nationally, not always locally by any stretch, but nationally, who would believe that the federal government should restrict the right of citizens to keep and bear arms.
Can I get back to
What kind of grades do you give Ronald Reagan as president? And what kind of grades is the John Birch Society giving?
Well, I would say in his speeches, Pat, you'd have to give him close to an A, B plus to an A. But in his performance,
what's most disappointing?
Well, I think the fact that the rhetoric is going one way and the record is going another.
Let me ask you about this conspiracy again.
Well, you can take the issue of one of the major problems of this country is inflation,
right,
and the problems of the destruction of the dollar. And the fact of the matter is, in spite of promises to the contrary, Reagan has not moved to correct the deficiencies. We're now back to Keynesian economics despite comments to the contrary.
Do you think that's a result of the conspiracy you mentioned? Is there somebody working on them to get the inflation so that this country will be weakened?
Well, as a man who campaigned against elitism, as a man who in his campaign rhetoric said that he would not be having the Council on Foreign Relations trilateral types dominating his cabinet, he's got about 250 members of such in his administration.
Well, let me ask you about Bill Casey. Now, I've known Bill.
250 members. Of the trilateral commission.
I've known Bill Casey
in the administration.
I've known Bill Casey, the director of CIA, since World War II. As a matter of fact, in World War II, he was my boss. Now, your public relations director of the John Birch Society says that Bill Casey is a part of this conspiracy that's trying to bring about world government.
Before he became CIA, one of his big jobs was aiding in the transfer of technology and goods and so forth to the Soviet Union, helping the Kama River Project, the Export-Import Bank, helping to finance these things.
Is the Export-Import Bank part of the conspiracy?
I think the whole drive, the fact that the American people have been tapped steadily, especially since World War II, to finance their enemies, and to have the massive technology transfer to those who
I
would
agree
do it.
with
And
you
you
on
know
that.
that from the Braden Doctrine in the agency, which you're very familiar with, and the feeling that we must somehow subsidize the, quote, non-communist left. That's among our so-called allies.
Braden was
And in
subsidizing
country
the
after country,
non-communist left?
that turned out to be the communists, the crypto-communists masquerading
Yeah,
as
that's
the non-communist left.
Mr. Mitterrand, who has taken the strongest position against the Russians of any Western European
Well,
leader.
he was about to lose everything at the polls, and he had to show some sign. It's very difficult to say exactly how far that will be.
Congressman McDonald, he's been
Yeah.
using the term conspiracy.
No, I didn't use it.
No,
For
no.
heaven's sakes, Pat. The John Birch Society used
I
it.
don't want to go through the tapes.
Well, it is. Don't blame it on me. He used it.
You've used it 45 times.
That's right. They say this is a conspiracy.
All
I
right.
want to know what the conspiracy
Well,
is.
Tom.
I'm trying to find out who's in it and what agencies of government in it, because I want to fight it along with you.
You look
And
like...
Great, Tom. Let me tell you, Tom.
You tell me,
you know-
how can I join the John
My
Birch
question
Society?
has been
Well, gosh,
forgotten.
Tom, you got no problem at all. All you need to do is write a letter to the John Birch Society, Belmont, Massachusetts, 02178, and
Yeah.
tell them that you would like to purchase for $2 a copy of the Blue Book. Tom, you read it, and I think if you're a dedicated American, you will agree with every word. Then you get in touch with me, and we may even sign you up.
Yeah, but it says here in one of your publications, not just anyone can be a Bircher. Now, how
I
can
said
I
not
be a
just
Bircher?
anyone. Now, if you don't believe in the Constitution and limited government and free enterprise and biblical values of morality,
I
Tom,
believe in all those,
you
but
would
I
not
don't.
qualify.
I don't
Well,
believe there's
right.
a conspiracy.
He'd make a
Well,
lousy
Tom,
candidate.
Tom, you know,
candidate.
as a matter of
Pat, a
fact,
member of the conspiracy. He's a member of the press.
Let me ask you, he's used, now Mr. Braden's used for the 47th time the term conspiracy. Now let me ask you seriously, when you use people like Casey, who is on the Council on Foreign Relations, David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission, what do you mean, or do you mean, is that your term, the term conspiracy?
well, there are many different levels of the problem. But yes, the term has been used, the term of conspiracy. When you have a group of people,
I mean, they're
working
actively collaborating, and at the other end of that point of collaboration are communists, and on this end of the point of collaboration is Bill Casey and trilateralists and,
And
CFR
Al
guys.
Haig.
you have people who are part of the elitist structure of this country that have dominated this country openly for 40 years.
I know, but they're not, is that a conspiracy?
Now, wait a minute. If people quietly working together for evil objectives, two or more, that by definition is a conspiracy. You have, by their own admission, you look at The Tragedy and Hope by Professor Carroll Quigley, who was a member of this elitist group. He says, sure, we've been working this. Sure, we've been collaborating with communism. Yes, we're working for a global accommodation. Yes, we're working for world government. The only thing I object to is that we have kept it a secret. And I think we've gone so far along, we should come out and say,
I'll bet you
"Oh, I
$1.50
think
that Bill Casey doesn't know who Professor Quigley is. I don't.
He's at Georgetown a number of years ago. wrote
he
his
died
book
a couple of years ago, and he wrote The Tragedy and Hope. He's a very noted member of your club, Tom.
Tom, you've
I
got to
don't have to
broaden
know.
your reading a
That's
little
right,
bit.
you really got to-
What I ought to do is read more about conspiracies, and that's why I'm interested in what
Well,
Mr.
I'll tell you what,
McDonald
what
says
you ought to
about it.
do is go back and look at your founder, Edward Mandell House, because he wrote the book Philip Drew, Administrator, and in
Colonel
this,
House.
Colonel House said that what he envisioned for the world was a world government along socialist lines as envisioned by Karl Marx. Now, that's your leader, now, Tom, so you got to go back to the beginning.
Well, his
and see
leader
what
was
the book-
Woodrow Wilson. Do you think he was a communist?
No, I think
conspiracy?
Woodrow Wilson was his follower. I think Edward Mandell House dominated Wilson, not the other way around.
And so Edward Mandell House, that was, we ought to make that clear. He was
Colonel House.
President Wilson's principal
Alter
advisor.
ego, that's correct.
Yeah. So he is the real villain from which all these conspiracies.
No. He is a
Descend.
major figure, Tom, but there has been, unfortunately, in the West, an element. There are good members in the Council on Foreign Relations, dedicated, patriotic people. You've had Sproul Braden, who was a member of the Council of the Birch Society.
Bill Buckley's a
and
member.
Council on Foreign Relations. You've got some dedicated people, but the driving forces have very clearly been willing to collaborate, subsidize, work for technology transfer for what they feel is some type of an accommodation and merger. And I submit this would be a disaster for the American Republic.
Are there any
I
in
guess-
Congress?
Sure.
Our guest has been Congressman Larry McDonald of the John Birch Society. He's the new chairman. He's succeeded Robert Welsh, who has stepped down, as I understand it. That's correct?
He's been sort of promoted to chairman
He's been
emeritus.
promoted chairman emeritus and founder. And Tom Braden and I will be back with final comments in a moment.
Pat, I just want to tell you, I think some of the people who served in the Nixon White House are good, clean, upstanding, patriotic Americans. And some of them, on the other hand, are suspect. And I'm just going to have Larry McDonald, the head of the Birch Society, take a look at some of those people, and I wonder if he might find you.
Tom, where I disagree
There's something going on here.
I disagree with Congressman McDonald is the idea of conspiracy with you and your friends. I think it's more of a herding instinct. The direction you've been moving in, inertia, carries you further and further. But I do think this. That slogan, get the U.S. out of the UN and the UN out of the U.S., looks better and better every day, doesn't it? Maybe they were ahead of their time on that one.
No, Pat, I think we got to have communications with the world, and the UN makes me mad too, but I don't think it's a part of the great conspiracy which extends from Bill Casey and Al Haig all the way to communism.
Well, I think that Larry McDonald's a patriot. I think he's wrong about the conspiracy, but he's probably less wrong about what he says about this country than the guy I'm talking to.
Okay, so there it is, guys. I found that interview to be really interesting and telling, especially the part where he just calls Tom Braden out for being a part of it and pretty much telling him that he knows he's playing dumb because Tom Braden is a part of the Rockefeller group. So, everything he said was pretty much right on. Now, I don't think he saw the bigger picture of it, of where they are ushering in this communist model, not for the sake of communism, but for the sake of ushering in the Antichrist. And they are just using communism as a shield or a veil to cover up their true intentions. But I still found a lot of value in what he said, so I thought I would share it with you guys and get your thoughts on it. So make sure to leave your comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button on your way out. I'll be talking to you guys real soon. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you're having a great day.